Mr. Chairman, I'll defer.
Then the other gentleman from Alabama, we've got both of them here today, is recognized for 5 minutes. Mr. Palmer.
The one who will not defer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is very interesting to me. I've worked for 2 engineering companies prior to running a think tank for 24, 25 years. I worked for Combustion Engineering and the Environmental Systems Division. We built, I see Dr. Brun nodding his head, we built scrubbers, precipitators, bag houses, and I just was wondering on the latest technology, how effective are we at capturing CO2 right now, Dr. Brun?
Depends on how concentrated your stream of it is. If you're doing flue gas, I mean, you can capture 100% of it, right? I mean, it's technically viable. It becomes a cost issue. It's easier to, the more concentrated your stream in your flue gases, the easier it is to capture it. That's why we're pushing for the oxyfuel and supercritical CO2 type cycles. But you can certainly remove CO2 from the flue gas of a combined cycle plant. The only problem is it is at a low percentage, and so you have to scrub a lot more gas to get the CO2 out. But even there, you can remove 100% of the CO2. It just becomes a cost of electricity issue and how much cost you want to add to your cost of electricity. So the technology there, in that sense, exists, and it is just a question of cost.
One of the reasons I'm asking this is that when it comes to fossil energy, most of the time when we're talking about capturing carbon, we're talking about coal. But there are uses or potential uses for capturing CO2 for unlocking oil resources from shale. And we've got the Green River Formation. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
The Green River Formation, and I have a GAO report, which was part of a committee hearing, I think in 2012, that got very little attention in the media. ABC News reported on it. But the Green River Formation holds 3 trillion barrels of recoverable oil. That's 3 times what the entire world's used in the last 100 years and 5 or 6 times the known reserves of the Saudis. It's just half of it would be more than the known all of OPEC combined. It's about half of it, 1.4 trillion, is the more recoverable, the richer deposits. But in your research, do you see the potential for using captured carbon for releasing or having access to such oil deposits?
Yeah, so I think using CO2 for enhanced oil recovery is certainly a recognized usage of carbon dioxide, and the combination of oxyfuel combustion plants where you get CO2 out and then you inject that at high pressures into the formation to get enhanced oil recovery is something that has been discussed by many oil companies. I've given presentations on the topic, actually. It is certainly viable technology for you.
But is it economically viable? Is it a cost?
Yes, it is economically viable. And it depends on your formation, it depends on your application, but there is certainly applications right now where it is economically viable, yes.
Do the Chinese or the Indian government do anything in regard to carbon capture?
The Chinese are doing quite a bit in that area, and maybe you can answer that too. But
yeah, any one of the panel, if you know the answer to that.
Yeah, the Chinese are very active, but you may have more information.
Yes, the Chinese are in fact the most active nation in the world in this area, doing large demonstrations and developing their own technology. The Indian government has done very little to this date.
And the Indian government is the fastest, the Indian economy is the fastest growing economy in the world, and they're doing quite a bit of building in regard to coal-fired power generating facilities. Is that accurate?
They are still building coal plants. It is decreasing there. They are building more renewables now than coal. Good.
Mr. Beggar, in your testimony you mentioned partnership between the Wyoming Integrated Test Center and the National Carbon Capture Center near Wilsonville, Alabama. That, by the way, is in my district. Can you give us a little more detail about the work that ITC intends to do through this partnership?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Congressman, the way that we see our role is complementing the work that National Carbon Capture Center and ETL and the other labs have done. And a few years ago, when the state was looking about how to best get involved, and through the course of about a year and a half of reviewing critical gaps in testing infrastructure, what we recognized is that there are a lot of places to do small testing, like the National Carbon Capture Center on the backside of that coal-fired power plant. They can test up to about 1.5 megawatt size projects, but utilities needed to see something larger before making that leap. And up until now, really the only way to do that was a one-on-one relationship between the technology developer going to a utility and asking to basically cut a hole in the side of their power plant and access some of their flue gas. And as you can imagine, they were pretty reluctant to do that unless there was a long-standing relationship. So what we've done with that facility is sort of create the infrastructure there, a plug-and-play system. And so what we would like to see is the most promising technologies that make it through there be that sort of graduate school for them to come and test. And another area is access to all the incredible resources. You know, over years at Wilsonville, they've developed incredible institutional knowledge, engineering skills, and so having the ability to basically access their lessons learned and their best practices can hopefully help us prevent making those sort of same mistakes.
Well, this is all fascinating to me, Mr. Chairman. I, as I said, worked in engineering and environmental systems, and my brother-in-law worked for Southern Research and was an expert in scrubbers and bag houses. He traveled all over the world. I would love for him to have been here. He probably would have had some better questions than me. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The ranking member from Texas recognized for another question.
Thank you, Mr.